The sages tell us that mourning has a very particular appearance, a very particular rubric. When a person first finds out that a close relative has passed away, before that relative is buried, there is one particular status of not even, on the one hand the deepest kind of mourning, but it's not yet a practice of mourning. It's called aninus. Aninus is when a person is involved exclusively with bringing that close relative to burial. Then we start what's called Shiva, which we're all familiar with, unfortunately, sitting for 7 days after the burial of a close relative. For 7 days, one sits, doesn't do work, doesn't shower or cleanse themselves, doesn't care about appearance, he rents his garments, all of those kinds of things. Then there is a 30-day period called Shloishim, which means 30. And if we're talking about for father and mother, there's an entire year up to 11 months, when again there is an even less potent level of mourning. All of this is specifically designed by the sages, of course based on different verses from different places in the Torah, so that a person who has a particular way, every person has a psyche that more or less works the same way, that a person should be able to heal, not to forget, God forbid, but to heal from the loss of a close relative. That's the way that a person kind of operates. Until the burial takes place, he's nowhere able to begin to even heal. Therefore, he doesn't do any of the practices of mourning. He's just focused on getting the person to burial. Once that's behind him, and we know that that's settled, now he has to turn to himself and to begin to mourn. Of course, he starts with the deepest kind of mourning, then a little bit lighter, and then a little bit lighter, and then he's, as it were, done. Again, never forgetting the loss, but having healed from it. The sages are very particular that one is not to violate this particular rubric. One, for example, cannot mourn in this way for someone who is not a close relative, even if they are a very close friend, a colleague, whatever. A particular feeling of mourning, that's fine, but this particular design is not for them. Because as close as one might be to such a person, because he is not a close relative, it's not going to work the same way psychologically. By the same token, a person is not allowed to ignore the requirements of those particular segments of mourning, because that's not healing, that's just kind of not dealing with the situation. By the same token, a person is not allowed to extend those segments of mourning. One isn't allowed to do the practices of Shiva for 20 days as opposed to the 7 prescribed days. He's not allowed to do Shloishim for 3 months. He's not allowed to do it. One is certainly not allowed to mourn for 22 years. Why is Jacob doing this? The sages point out that the concept of mourning, and that it eventually brings to healing, only works when a person has actually passed away. In this case, Joseph has not passed away. The fact that Jacob thinks he has passed away is irrelevant to the fact that spiritually and psychologically that's not what happened. And for that reason, he can't find the typical healing that would occur when a person properly mourns, because there's nobody to really mourn. Hence, he's in this constant state of mourning for 22 years. We'll note that these 22 years isn't a random number. The same amount of time that Jacob himself was away from his parents, 7 years when he first married Leah, when he was supposed to marry Rachel, but really married Leah, then another 7 years to then eventually marry Rachel, then another 6 years to work for a parnasa, all 20 years with Laban, and then he spent 2 more years on the road back from Haran until he got home to his parents. Those 22 years is exactly the same number of years that Joseph, his son, will be kept from him.